Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jordan Youkilis here with Key Investment Partners, and I'm very excited this afternoon to have another episode of Unlocking Cannabis. My guest today is Charlie Uchill with CERES Coin. Charlie, thanks so much for joining the podcast this afternoon.
Hey, Jordan, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you and join in on this podcast. Really like what you guys are doing with it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. And we're really excited to have you. You know, I think both cannabis and cryptocurrency are obviously sectors that have garnered a lot of investor interest lately. And so it'll be really exciting to really dive into both of those sectors and really how they overlap with CERES. But before we get into that, we'd just love to learn a little bit more about you and your background. So we'd love to just hear about your background from an education standpoint and where your career was before CERES.
Sure. So I'm a 1992 graduate of the United States Military Academy. Went on to, as is my partner in CERES. Both were class of 92 at West Point. I went in to branch into the infantry and went on to serve actually with the U.S. Army Rangers out in with 2nd Ranger Battalion out in Tacoma, Washington. Really great opportunity there. It was a real privilege to lead probably the finest soldiers in the world. After leaving the Rangers, I actually went to Chicago, where I went down to the Chicago Board of Trade and was working down on the floor. I started off as a runner down there. I was very interested in trading. I've always been fascinated by that. But I got a job as a runner, and that's literally running orders out into the corn pit. Would go on to become a clerk in the soybean oil options pit. And then from there, I went on to clerk for 4 days for a person that was trading derivatives upstairs electronically. This was in the late 90s. And he said, the only way you're going to learn how to trade this is to trade these products yourself. So he opened a trading account for me right away after 4 days. And I traded all types of different esoteric derivative products, whether they be warrants, convertible options, closed-end funds, anything that we could kind of have an arbitrage opportunity with, I traded. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I did some consulting work, tried to launch a fund. And then my partner right now, Greg Anderson, said, hey, how about helping me fund a real estate project down in Austin, Texas? That pivoted into seeing that there was an opportunity actually in crowdfunding or real estate debt opportunities. Specifically, we focused on mezzanine debt lending, and we were all set and actually had some wonderful projects with that. And all of a sudden, we got all these cannabis operators saying, hey, we'll pay the same interest rates that you're charging on this mezzanine subordinated debt, but we'll put you in senior position. But just know that it's in the cannabis industry. And at first, Greg and I said, absolutely not interested, until we started touring some of the facilities in Washington, California, Colorado, and saw just how sophisticated and real these businesses were, and saw that was an opportunity. And from there, we formed, again, CERES that was initially to provide lending to the space, and CERES Coin pivoted right out of that. But that ran you up there 20 years right there. Almost 30.
Wow, fantastic. So first off, I want to say thank you for your service. Really appreciate everything you've done. And from there, would love to learn a little bit more about, when you got into CERES, how you decided to develop a cryptocurrency, right? And why you thought that was the right approach to tackle the problem that you were solving.
Sure. So one of the states that we went to was Washington State. Had to be back around 2016. 17, we're up there, and a lot of the projects that we were looking at were in Washington State. And Washington State had some very stringent or strict laws that governed how money could come in to support, either through debt or equity investment, in a Washington State licensed project. And it was very restrictive how you could get foreign money in and how you could especially do a debt deal. So we started examining different ways to do these debt deals, and we started seeing that if the operator maybe owned their building, that we could do this as a real estate loan, and we would use the lease revenues generated by the owner of the building as the collateral for what we were doing. So we were trying to find creative ways to bring this money in. And then we were trying to figure out, all right, what type of vehicle can we use to securitize these lease revenues per se to sell to investors? And someone suggested that we look at a crypto coin. And I had no idea what a crypto coin was. And they explained what it was. And I said, all right, well, this is kind of interesting. The crypto coins that I had seen had no real underlying tangible value, but our coin would. And then we could try to sell these coins to investors that then were supported by the lease revenues. And that was how we settled on Ceres. This was also during the whole initial coin offering ICO craze that was going on in 2017 and 18, where people were creating these coins and raising hundreds of millions of dollars overnight. Right. And one of the things that was promised to me or suggested to me, that if I created this coin that was still backed by these revenues, that it wasn't a security and it wasn't anything. No regulator knew what it was. So I could just raise money as an asset and raise money like that. And I had been down at the Board of Trade long enough and traded enough, upstairs electronically to realize, if I bring in investor capital and I form this investor contract with them, no matter what I call this coin, asset, whatever, this was a security and would therefore fall under the auspices of the SEC. And if we were going to raise money, we were going to do it in a manner that was compliant with SEC rules, regulations, and the Investment Acts of 33 and 34. And that's what we did.
That makes sense. So is my understanding correct that a lot of the other cryptocurrencies today that are not technically securities are considered commodities, and that's how they've been able to get around having to go through the SEC registration?
Or they've either done that or they've gone with the mantra, seek forgiveness instead of asking permission. And the SEC and CFTC and a lot of those agencies are playing not necessarily catch up, but there's just so many of them out there that they're just slowly, methodically going after them. And you're seeing headline after headline after headline that such and such coin was an unregistered securities offering. This was an unregistered securities offering. This was an unregistered securities offering. And as we spent our time working with the regulators on what we were doing with Ceres, it was still sometimes a little frustrating watching all the money that was being raised. And we weren't really able to tap into these markets until we got our qualification, because we did our register, not as a registration, but we did our offering as a Reg A plus tier 2 offering, which is you're exempt from registration, but you still almost have to go through the same requirements, almost just a little like a diet version, a skinny version of a registration. And you do this exempt offering, but you still have to file with the SEC, still have to provide them audited financials, and still have to get a notification of approval for qualification by the SEC. Not many of these coin offerings have done it. And they're now going to put their investors, actually they technically can't call them investors, at some type of regulatory risk because it's really uncertain what it is they sold to those people.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, something might never happen, but like the biggest one you're probably seeing right now is a big popular cryptocurrency called Ripple, which has multi-billion-dollar cryptocurrency, one of the largest ones out there. The SEC has sued Ripple and said that was an unregistered securities offering, and Ripple has chosen to fight it. I think Ripple makes some compelling arguments. Everyone's just trying to get their head wrapped around what a coin is. We just decided right away from the start, let's take that regulatory uncertainty out of the way and we'll get into it, why we chose the SEC. But we instead of hiding from the regulators, we went and sought out a regulator and basically said, we're choosing you and you're not going to leave us no matter what. And we're going to hug and hold you until we get our notice of qualification from you.
That makes sense. And, I would love to dig in further to that, SEC registration process. But, I think it makes a ton of sense what you're saying. And, interestingly, you're talking about some of what I'll call, maybe the more nefarious, or not even nefarious, but just, to your point, ask for forgiveness, not permission type players. And I think we've seen a lot of that on the other side of the coin, pun intended, in the cannabis industry, not necessarily with cryptocurrencies, but folks that are creating payment solutions that are, looking to circumvent, wire fraud laws, and we're seeing SEC regulators crack down on them as well. So while I'm sure the path to go through that SEC registration process was extremely painful and arduous at the time, over the long term, it will have proven to be the right way to go.
I believe so. You're exactly right. It was painful. It was difficult, but I think it was painful and difficult for the regulators too, because they're in a difficult position. They're trying to come up with a solution that isn't just a solution for this one individual thing they're looking at, but it's going to have ramifications and consequences for follow-on registrations and qualifications. And in the early process, especially, and I'm sure you're seeing in the cannabis industry too, any type of regulation that comes down, people are going to try to how they can take advantage of it. And again, though regulation, the cannabis industry are in the same kind of boat, and on the crypto side, they absolutely are. So I understood what the SEC was doing. In fact, I look back on this 2-year, 3-month, and 11-day process, and that's how long it took.
Who's counting, right?
I think we've done a lot of the legwork on behalf of the SEC with the right questions and comments that they forced us to answer. We were doing a lot of the research, kind of that they will use going forward, and it was frustrating. It was tedious. It was hard, but it made us a better company. I will tell you that without a doubt. I said when we created Ceres Token and our coin, and we'll get into that eventually, that, this is how it's going to be treated. And I could get our little pitch out in 3 minutes. The SEC forced me with their questions and comments to really dig into what it was that someone was buying, how it was going to be transacted, how it was going to be treated, what disclosures that we had to begin, what accounting treatment we would have to follow. It really forced us to get into really the incredible details that you really need to do as a business. And in that regard, again, it made us a better company. Now, I didn't always say that under my, in private, what I would say, the regulators, they were doing that to us, but it really they made us a better company because of it.
And I would imagine you also really help the regulators, right, and figure out, how the process will work in the future for additional coin offerings. I
would like to think so. I think especially near the end, over the last 9 months, I got to know a lot of the directors at the SEC, both in Corp Fin and the Office of Chief Accountant on a first name basis, and we were having some very robust discussions. Specifically into the accounting treatment of both our tokens and our coins. That was, we didn't always agree, and it was never personal, it was never malicious. We were both trying to work through a lot of things that I thought were obvious, but from their perspective, I see how you're looking at this. Here's where I think you're wrong, and they go, well, here's where we think you're wrong, and eventually we came to kind of an agreement, and we got our qualification, or approved.
That makes sense. Qualification. Yeah. And would love to learn a little bit more about, exactly how that SEC process played out and some of the big learnings you had. But I think before we get into that, would probably be helpful for myself as well as our listeners would be to take a step back and really understand Ceres structure overall, because it is complicated. And you've used a couple of terms like stable coin, security token. Know that Ceres also has a more traditional lending business that's not a cryptocurrency. So it would be great if you could just kind of zoom out a little bit and just explain the different components of the business and why you had to structure these various components to make it all work together.
Sure. So going back to where we started at the beginning of the conversation on how we could, we were addressing a symptom, I think, of the problem in the industry. And back in 2017 and 18, it's not as bad today, but it still exists. And one of the symptoms of the problem was the lack of debt capital being able to come into the industry. Most of the ways that a lot of the cannabis companies were raising money was either through the sale of equity that was the primary way to do it, was the sale back. With very few debt structures there. So we said, hey, let's create this debt instrument, and we would raise money, and through some special purpose, single purpose vehicles, put out $1 to $3 million at a time. And then to our token hold. So, and we would create this token that would be this digital asset. So, and that's all it is. It's just, instead of it being on a piece of paper, it's just digital, and it exists on a ledger, and there's different protocols that you can put it on. But that's all that a token was. It didn't need to be a token. It was just, again, how we were going to market it and sell it. And I'm glad we did do it like we did. So this digital token was initially just going to be a single security that we were going to do as part of our offering. And again, you would give me $100. I'd invest that $100, and I was going to split the revenues with you. You'd get 80, I'd get 20, kind of a 20-80 carry type deal. When we brought this to our attorneys about how we were going to raise money, we had a really robust discussion about, hey, if we create this digital asset that is a freely tradable security under this Reg A, and Reg A allows for this token to be traded anywhere. So it doesn't have to be an accredited investor who buys it, just has to be a qualified investor. So it's pretty much open to anyone could buy this token. What we discussed, that if we create this token that is freely tradable anywhere, and someone has it in their pocket and they say, you know what, I want to transfer ownership of it to this dispensary over here. And instead of getting money for the token, the dispensary happens to give them product, joints, gummies, whatever. We can track that transaction because everything will happen on our ledger. But we didn't feel like we were violating. There was no laws being violated. This was a private transaction between two individuals, had nothing to do with money. There was no money being transacted here. It's just someone transferred ownership of the security over to a dispensary. Dispensary, instead of paying cash for it, just happened to give them product. And now they have the security. And when the dispensary wanted to sell the security back to us, which it said in their investment agreement that they could then give us the security back, and we give them dollars. So what I just described to you is the only flow of dollars into and out of our system was either to buy security or for us to, or for them to sell it back to us. Perfectly legal transaction, nothing that anyone could really complain about. But letter of the law made this really, I think, really compelling to the industry, is that we can track down to the penny what is happening on that transaction, who, what, where, when, how much. So for the banks that have to do these suspicious activity reports for their customers, our chain code and the code that was happening with the coin could actually fill out the reports for them in real time. And we could get, again, down to the penny what was going to be done to the transaction. So initially we had one coin that was going to do this. And we loved ourselves. We thought we were going to be the new Bitcoin. We were going to issue this for $1. Our coin was going to go to $100 or $1,000, and we were going to be millionaires. We were going to be really excited about that. And it was our CTO on a Friday call that said, hey, if our coin is as volatile as Bitcoin, no one will ever take it out of their digital wallet to transfer ownership of it over to a dispensary, because no one will know what it's worth. And the dispensary will have no idea what it's worth, so they'll be less inclined to take it. We've got to somehow tamp out the volatility. And that's what we did. So we bifurcated our offer. We kept this Ceres token as an investment vehicle, but we also introduced now under the same offering a stable coin, a coin that would always be worth $1, no matter what. And the way we would reward our token holders was every time the coin moved, we took a transaction fee, and a portion of that transaction fee would flow back to the token holder. So now the token holders are participating in two lines of business, our cannabis real estate lending business and this new blockchain transaction network, that the greater velocity that we got, the more times our coins moved, the more money that they made. So that's what we created. Then we had to figure out what was this stable coin and how would the SEC look at it, and how would the SEC treat it? And that became the elegance of what we did then in the offering, and probably what really forced us to take 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days to get through the process.
Yeah,
I hope I explained that well. That again,
you did.
one that Ceres token is essentially legal form preferred equity that allows you to participate in our lines of business. And the stable coin is strictly on the crypto people out there. It is a utility token.
Yep.
For everyone else, for the securities people here, it is a debt security note due on demand that you have an investment contract with us 24/7, 365. You know that you can redeem that note with us and we'll issue you cash.
Got it. So if retail investors wanted to purchase either the stable coin or the security token as not necessarily a store of value, or sorry, as a way to purchase product from dispensaries, but rather as more of an investment asset, is that something that they could do? And are there exchanges that they could do that through?
Sure. So that the token, which again was just approved March 29th, 2021, we got our approval. If you want to invest and participate with Ceres, which we think it's a very neat investment, has a kind of this fixed income attribute based on the lending, on the interest rates that we get on the loans that we put out and how good our underwriting is, and still gets a chance to participate on what we think can be a huge market for creating a digital payment system, not only for the cannabis industry, but for everything beyond, then yeah, you can buy that token and it will go live probably in the next, talking about 8 weeks. We're
Okay.
approved. We want to sell all, right now we're registered or qualified to sell up to 30 million. We will probably be amending that fairly soon because the SEC changed the rules where we can sell up to about 50 million of these tokens. They'll be able to buy them directly from us.
Mhm.
And we do have an agreement in place with a broker dealer where these tokens will be listed on an alternative trading system, ATS, and they will trade in that secondary market.
Gotcha. No, that's
The
great.
coins are strictly for those people. We have to first are going to be onboarding dispensaries and operators to, again, use our coin. We'll start out with our coins actually on a B2B basis. We're going to bring on a wholesaler and to test through our initial run of coins. The group of dispensaries will use the coins to buy from the wholesaler, and they'll be able to see that, hey, we don't have to there's no dollars going back and forth in sprinter vans. It's this digital system that can tie into our inventory management system. And then those dispensaries can become our sales force to say, hey, we're paying our wholesaler with these digital coins. We want digital coins too. It's easy to sign up. There's going to be a mobile app that you can use, much like your Starbucks card or your Dunkin' Donuts card. And then everything becomes digital. And now, and on this network, regulators have access to the ledger, banks have access to the ledger, operators have access to the ledger. And we slowly go from this, we're the central node to begin with, and we decentralize out, allowing other people to be node holders within our network. It's a pretty neat system.
Got it. It is. And, I think the whole concept of decentralization and immutability, especially in the cannabis industry, is so hypercritical because of seed to sale tracking requirements and regulations that you were just touching on. So it'd be great if you could just expand on that for some of the folks listening in who may not be as familiar with how those regulations work and why that's so critical within the cannabis industry.
Sure. And so because cannabis remains, a class 1 drug, it's technically illegal for you to own at the federal level, own, use, transport, buy, sell, grow it at all. It's just what's happened is 34, actually not like 36, 37, you probably know better than I, the number of states have come up with their own state laws that contradict the federal laws and operate kind of in a closed loop system within their own state on how things are going to operate. But because banking is done at the federal level, it creates a regulatory dilemma for a lot of the banks. The ones that have chose to bank it, and they're usually regional banks or credit unions.
Sure.
they are working with their local regulator to say, hey, if we bank an operator, this is how we're going to follow the Bank Secrecy Act rules. This is how we're going to make sure we're doing it in a compliant manner. And it's a very localized relationship between regulator and bank on how that will work. It makes it very difficult to expand it to a federal level. And the compliance costs are relatively high because it's a very capital intensive relationship that even when the banks decide, hey, we're going to bank it, they got to make sure that the cannabis operator is following all state laws, they're properly licensed, they're verifying where the transactions are happening from. And because it's a very cash heavy system, it's very difficult to, the banks having to deal with large amounts of cash put, again, higher degree of compliance on them to prevent money laundering and illicit transactions from happening. Mm-hmm. And creating this digital payment system, we really address those issues that those banks and credit unions have. And we help simplify the system for it and make it in a again, just a more, it's an easier system to utilize, less capital intensive, really taking advantage of the attributes of blockchain and this immutability, this ledger that's completely auditable, and an ability to track and trace all these transactions, and again, down to the penny to identify where this value is coming from in each and every account.
Got it. That's really interesting. And so, there's clearly a need for what you're providing to the cannabis industry and helping to facilitate these payments so that they don't all have to be done in cash. Now, I'm curious to get your thoughts on some of the other solutions that have developed within cannabis that use more traditional financial services as a means to try to solve the same problem, and why you believe that the cryptocurrency route in Ceres in particular is the best path forward.
So, yeah, and I love the entrepreneurs that are in this space. I think they're very smart. I think they're very creative. I don't claim to know exactly how they do it. I mean, it's been hard enough for me to understand exactly what is happening in our transaction, sure, and to make sure that we're following that the proper regulations that make us compliant with whoever the regulator is. So there's only couple of ways that I see these things. Actually, I can't totally speak to it. I would guess that some people are acting as money transmitters or money service businesses, and therefore would be required to register in each state and be licensed in every state for these transactions to happen. Or some of the banks are somehow facilitating these transactions. I have talked with Fiserv in talks with MasterCard and Visa, because this becomes a really interesting transaction that I would argue makes credit card transactions feasible with us. Because again, the swipe of a credit card in using us would not be for cannabis, mm-hmm, which MasterCard and Visa will say we do not allow on their rails. Now, you might know, I'm sure you do, dispensaries out there that right now can facilitate debit and credit card transactions. In my talks with Fiserv and MasterCard and Visa, they would say those transactions should not be able to happen, but we know they do. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to guess how they are doing it. Again, you might have more insight than I do. Our argument is, again, that a swipe of a credit card to do this transaction would be like, Jordan, you had an account with me, you swiped a credit card. All you did was swipe the credit card to buy coins, and then immediately chose to transfer ownership of those coins over to a dispensary in exchange for this private party deal of, mm-hmm, you bought $100 worth of coins, you got $100 of marijuana product from the dispensary. But the only thing that swipe of the credit card was for was to buy a security. Mm-hmm. We discussed this with MasterCard and Visa for going on 13 months now, where I get a little frustrated. I think we're almost too transparent, that they know what my stable coin is going to be ultimately used for, that they're a little wary of the transaction happening, that you're going to take it and transfer ownership of these securities in exchange for cannabis. Technically, you could swipe your credit card, buy my stable coins, and hold on to the coins the rest of your life, and just say, hey, I'm doing it almost like I'm putting money under my mattress. We're not going to pay you much, if any, of a dividend at all for doing that.
Yep.
But you should know that that is that's protected. And the day that you choose to turn those coins back into me, you can. And I will give you the dollars equal to that minus the transaction fees. That's how we went about it. So I mean, I don't profess, nor do I even want to speculate on how the other operators are doing it. I think there are some real above board. I think there's a lot of operators, though, that payments processors that are really skating the rules, and they both help and hurt us, because we come across as a cannabis blockchain cryptocurrency that, we say those words, we thought that would excite people. We're now having to overcome a lot of like skepticism, and the BS detectors immediately go off when some of these people hear cannabis and crypto.
Sure.
It's the like, thanks but no thanks. I've got my little banking in line. I've got my Rube Goldberg system set up, how I can make stuff happen. Don't mess with it. And right now, you guys kind of look like as a threat, even though, again, I think we would help facilitate it. And we're having to overcome that. We're slowly getting there. It's not an overnight process, definitely, with us.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. And so then I'm curious, as you go and continue to roll out the stable coin and work with dispensary customers, what are the target customers that you're looking to partner with? Are they, individual dispensary operators? Are they large MSOs? Who is the ideal client for you?
So the ideal one for us to roll this out is an MSO, I think. Just because, they would they'd be the greatest catalyst for this. And it would give them a chance, especially these vertically integrated ones, where they'd have this low cost, no cost chance to participate in the development of this network. And we are in the middle of the development. I mean, this network is being developed right now today. We're developing it on Hyperledger Fabric blockchain protocol. It's the same one that Walmart uses for its food trust, tracking food shipments throughout the supply chain. IBM built it for them. We actually reached out to IBM to ask if we could build our blockchain network for the cannabis industry on top of what they did with food trust. And IBM said, thanks, but no thanks, don't want to touch the cannabis industry. But they connected us with four of their preferred providers who actually helped produce and develop that. And we chose one of them. So we're building this network out right now and reaching out to these MSOs to say, hey, we're building this. What is it that you want to see? What reports do you want to see? How do you want to see it integrated with your supply chain? How do you want to see it integrated with your inventory management system? We can do all that. And we just looking for that one operator who would be the catalyst for it. We've had some very productive calls, actually, in the last week. And I hope to be close with one of these MSOs to partner with us on this.
Fantastic. And so as you think about the industry going forward, and as legislation like the Safe Banking Act potentially passes, or even something more exhaustive like the Chuck Schumer bill that was recently proposed, how do you think that will impact the need for a solution like Ceres Coin as some of these more traditional financial services products open up to cannabis? So
one of the things that's important to understand is that we are far more at the micro level. We are this neat digital payment system. But what we've essentially done is we for each state, our blockchain network creates the infrastructure that a state's cannabis industry could run on, be it their licensing processes, their testing processing. Everything could function right on our blockchain network, with the key component being that also a transaction could now happen. There are systems right now that you could do it, but no one's really addressed how does a transaction, how does this transmission of value happen that's tied into the network? We've done that. So, we've talked to multiple states about being that state's infrastructure. So states right now get a seed to sale tracker. We'd love to work with these seed to sale tracking systems and tie into what they're doing with our payment system. But we've become the infrastructure for that particular state. Now, as you bring up the Safe Banking Act, and it goes back to what I said, right now there's about 700 or 800 banks, according to FinCEN, that bank this industry. And like I said, most of those are governed by local regulators overseeing the banks within their state. As soon as you bring this to the federal level, like if you look at the Safe Bank Act on what it's going to do, you're going to now federalize rules and laws that are governing this. So the rules and laws that are working in Maine for the Maine banks to bank the Maine operators are now going to have to be the same in Maine as they are in California, as they are in Alaska. And I think that's going to push some of those regional banks out of the industry, because it's going to force them to do some compliance tasks that their regulator locally is comfortable with, but might not be in line with what they're going to come up with federal rules and laws. And the federal rules and laws are actually, if you've looked at the Safe Bank Act, I think it's like paragraphs 5, 6, and 7, actually add on some social equity requirements, some lending requirements that the banks have to do before they get this waiver to allow, where they won't be prosecuted. There's really some additional compliance requirements they're going to have to come up with. And I think it's actually going to maybe reduce the number of banks. My guess. We have this system will facilitate those transactions. So even if the Schumer bill one day, if and when it passes, you're going to need a system like Ceres that everyone can be comfortable and be able to track, trace, and see every transaction down to the penny, how it can happen. So we think our system actually, I think, becomes a takeout target at that point for the banks, maybe for a reg tech firm, maybe for someone like an IBM that wants to get into the supply chain management. We are going to build, we're almost not a cannabis company. We're kind of this fintech, reg tech type company. And it really creates an opportunity. You're going to need a system like us for these transactions to happen.
Makes sense. Well, Charlie, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate you taking the time to get on the podcast and walk through all of this. To the extent there are potential customers or MSO partners who want to reach out to you, or investors interested in this upcoming security offering, is there a great way for them to reach out to you or the team?
Sure. Right at my email address, Charlie, CHARLIE, at cerescoin.io. And the tokens will be for sale public very, very, very soon. Our circular is up on Edgar. If you search the Edgar, SEC Edgar website, you can see the circular right there. So all the information is up there, available for public consumption. One thing I didn't get a chance to say, and on the crypto side, we did receive just, in the last month, I think it might have just been dated July 1st, we received a patent, and the title of our invention, we have a US patent for this, is the stablecoin is a medium of exchange on a blockchain transaction network. Now, for other people that are on this call that are like, hey, I know other cryptos that are out there that are stablecoins, how did you get this patent? Initially, I think the investigator felt, he had 30 issues with how we described it. But when he heard everything that we had gone through with the SEC, that the art matched the effort, which matched the whole product. And I think that is what encouraged him or influenced him enough to say, you know what, you guys have the patent for this. We actually have 3 more patents pending on that stablecoin network. So I didn't get to touch on that. But yeah, Charlie at cerescoin.io. You go to our website, www.cerescoin.io. And anyone who wants to reach out to me, happy to hop on a call anytime with them.
Perfect. Well, Charlie, thanks again. Really appreciate you taking the time and educating our audience about what you guys are doing at Ceres. Some really exciting stuff. So congratulations on all the progress you all have made so far to date.
Jordan, thank you very much. And I really enjoy your, this podcast, and again, what you guys are doing at Key Investment Partners. And as we get along, hopefully we'll be getting a chance to work with you too on this. So thank you very much for hosting this and having me on. Really loved it.
Great. Have a great rest of your evening, Charlie.
Thanks very much, Jordan.